Hi, and welcome back to the Mob Mentality Show. I'm Chris Lucian, and co-host is Austin Chadwick. And today we have Wouter Lagerweij, and we are going to be discussing quite a few things. But first, can you give us a little introduction about yourself, and we can get into the topics?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Wouter. Um, I'm an agile coach. I still call myself that. Fewer people seem to be doing that lately. I'm also a technical coach, and I've had a very odd career where I actually rolled from right from university in the late 90s. I rolled into a company where people were not quite doing XP because it wasn't all that well defined yet. But I spent the first like 3 or 4 years of my career pair programming and doing TDD because we've got some old small talk people in the company. Um, and I kind of started, that company went bankrupt because the dot-com bubble. So I went on and spent a lot of time looking at how people are not working together and not writing any tests until I found out that this thing was actually called Agile now and had a name, and I started doing that. Um, so I'm last 15 years or so I've been coaching, and I'm happiest if I can sit with leadership on strategy and structure and process in the morning, and sit with teams and do some mobbing or pairing and technical work in the afternoon. And sometimes very rarely clients actually let me do both of those things at the same in the same place.
All right. Well, our topics today are legacy, real teaming, and bug collectors. So maybe we can jump into the legacy discussion and go from there. What were you thinking there?
Yeah, well, I kind of always think that legacy is the most popular topic in software development, and I think that because everywhere I go, people have legacy systems, so we must like building them a lot. Um, and I've been I've been just running into that all throughout my life, and um, so much that at some point I started, running into the same themes again and again and again. And I even wrote a book about it, which is mostly aimed at, you know, this. Have you noticed this? You run into, I get this all the time. So you go into a company and they can't deliver, and they've got huge amount of bugs, and they can't seem to dig themselves out of that particular hole. And I talk to the product people, and they say, well, yeah, but that's an engineering thing. And every time we try to talk about it, they say we should mind our own business. And then I talk to the engineers, and they say, well, yeah, we've been trying to fix this, but we never get the room from our product people, and they don't seem to be interested in it at all, right? So they don't really own the whole product. They just like the new features. And it seems like these people are just like working past each other.
Hmm.
And this happened to me so often that I wrote a full book about how to involve product people in fixing a legacy system. So that's kind of how that came about. There was a mistake. It's a lot of work writing a book. Uh, Turns out, but the idea was, if you write it down once, then at least you can give people the book, and all problems will disappear magically. But I've been trying. No, but so anyway, but it's been a theme in my life, and I very much like it. I'm one of those weird people who enjoys working in legacy code and doing refactoring and fixing it and creating the tests. So I enjoy that part of it, and I just wanted to make a somewhat of a statement to make it a real common problem to fix together. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I love that you're attacking it or addressing it from both kind of the leadership business side and the technical side of the house. Yeah, because definitely quite a bit of literature, or at least significant literature in the technical side of how to address it. And I'm sure more could be written, but addressing both together it does seem quite novel. And yeah, I guess maybe without giving away your trade secrets, what are some top tips for these two worlds that seem to be like ships passing in the night and not understanding each other on this legacy problem? Yeah, what's your kind of go-to moves there?
You know, looking at what you talk about normally in the show, I don't think the core is a surprise, right? It takes small steps. Work closer together and actually communicate. Um,
Yeah.
Yep.
that I don't think that's a surprise. The thing that I use in the book, and which I've used with a couple of clients, is I try to take some of the things that a lot of the product people know, like story mapping and example mapping, and connect that to um, how you basically create a solid set of tests for legacy code. So, and I try to just um, make sure that that happens in a iterative way, that they don't try and rewrite the system, because that seems to be also be a fairly popular approach. And I've done that, right? I mean, I remember and this I say this often because it's wonderful. I worked at a company at one time, and we rewrote the same system 5 times in 4 years.
Four
It's not.
years. Yeah, that's good.
It
So
was one of
productive.
those scale up situations, and it was good practice. I learned a lot of things.
Yeah.
I learned, that you actually need to write some tests first. And then I learned that even if you write the tests, you can still find out that you don't know what all kinds of default behaviors are hidden in the system. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. So there's a lot of good learning there, but it's not a really great approach. Um, no, but I try in the book I try to explain that you've got if you have a legacy system, it means you don't have control, and you probably don't really know what it does, right? So, and even if you think you know what it does, you're probably wrong unless you have the tests to prove it. So, and then we go into a whole detailed process, because some people like getting a good handhold there of how you find out exactly what it does, and how you dive into the details only in the places where you need it, because that's where the complexity is, um, and how you turn that knowledge into tests. And then we do a little thing about mixing that with actually building new behavior, because you know I remember at one place I was at, I was actually having lunch next to the Oracle architects in that particular company, and they were having an off the cuff conversation, saying, "Yeah, no, we already told the business there will be no new functionality in the next 15 months, so we're all good. We can do the Oracle upgrade." Uh, yeah, that's probably not where you want to be as a company. So I try to make sure that we can take all the small steps that we need.
when
Yeah, yeah.
you're
Go
when
ahead, Chris.
you're
Yeah.
interacting with so I feel like often the technical side, while it's a area of a lot of debate, I find that when that first issue that you brought up of the teams talking past each other, or diverging incentives, and getting good conversations going, and what repairing what might have been a bad relationship in the past. Like those things are particularly challenging in environments. Um, do you have any advice or comments about strategy in that area?
But um, I Well, in different ways. When we're talking specifically about legacy, it is for me. It's really important to make sure that the product people and the management people. I call it, the book is like, Escaping Legacy, but it's the product owner's guide to escaping legacy. But it's really a little broader. It's anyone that's not in the technical sphere.
Mm.
Um, I try to connect, and that's a theme in my work. I try to connect to people's pain, um, and sometimes emphasize it. Right. So
Mhm.
every um, product owner that I've talked to, every engineering manager that I've talked to, is that's dealing with legacy systems is in pain. They cannot release,
Yeah.
right? They can't get their features out. They can't. They've got so many defects coming in that they have to spend sometimes full days discussing all of the defects that they can't fix yet. Right. So there's usually a lot of pain. So I try to make sure that the pain that the engineers feel, which is often similar, but sometimes more expressed in we don't like we working in this way, or we don't like working in this system. It just that gets connected to the pain that the company basically feels.
Right.
And I that tends to be for me at least, that tends to be enough. If we can make that connection, if we can see, okay, we're all in pain here. We may not know exactly how we got here, or maybe we can blame other people on how we got why we got here, right? Because that was the people who built the legacy system, and
Yeah.
the best case that was us last year. But usually, it's people like 5 years ago, and there's always someone that we can hang out to dry. But there's, um, but I try to like get away from that and just say, okay, so this is where we are at right now. Let's just start fixing that. And if we want to
Mm.
fix that, the first thing we need to do is we can't work in the way that we did while getting here.
Mm.
And I spend way too much time in the book. Sorry for any readers, but I spend way too much time just trying to sketch out this is how we get into trouble, right?
Yeah.
And again, those are familiar themes, right? Taking too large steps, not focusing on quality, allowing a buildup of defects, and losing touch with each other. So if we want to do better in the next time we build this system, we need to actually do it differently. I actually go as far myself as to redefine legacy as all the attributes of a system that make sure that we can't um, deliver at the pace that we want to,
Mm.
including the system that builds the system, right? It's you can't just fix the software without fixing how we build it.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, yeah. Fantastic. I have a whole plethora of questions, but one of them is I think one struggle I've had, maybe with me personally, is there is a way to, starting on the technical side at least, model in a mob or a pair, hey, let's do better with legacy code, right? So let's not ask for permission to write good code, like we're waiting for the business to tell us it's okay to do it, and just like in the work we're working on, write good comprehensive tests, change behavior in small steps driven by the tests, and then refactor and do better designs little by little here as we go. I guess one personal struggle I've seen is that I don't know if cult is the right word, but they're like, ah, that worked great. And then when you go look at what the team members who saw that modeled, what they do later is, oh, we're in legacy code. Let's write one test, do no refactoring, change the behavior. Maybe it's covered by the test, maybe it's not. Ship it until the business is done. And there's just kind of like that loss of, because when I see Feathers, in his book talking about working with legacy code, it's very comprehensive and very careful, right? And where it's just kind of like, oh yeah, we'll do a test thing. Okay, we checked our box. thanks. You know, yeah. How do you help teams with that transition?
Yeah. I very explicitly am not trying to compete with Michael Fellis. I was once at a conference where I was talking about legacy code, and it turned out that he was talking about it in the room next to me. And yeah, that's not fair. But um, um, but um, they it's maybe a little of um, a
Yeah.
sidetrack, but I think it that connects to one of the things that I've seen happening a lot in the conversation around Agile.
Hmm.
And it seems that we are sometimes afraid to be strict, right? Or to be prescriptive is maybe the word.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, and it's that Agile came, of course, as a very much as a direct reaction to very, very prescriptive ways of working. So I think that there's a reason why that happened. But if you look at the old XP teams, right, they were very, very disciplined. And the technical practices were well defined, and the types of tests that they would write were very well defined and were there for very specific reasons. And I tend to see teams nowadays. Oh, I feel old when I say nowadays. Anyway, I tend to see teams uh, quite frequently that um, never take the step to actually agree on what their standards are, what their basic quality levels are. And I see that in at testing. I see that in what kind of patterns do we use in our code, not just our linting agreements, but what how if we write this type of functionality, what does that look like in our system, and what type of tests do we always write for that? Those sort of agreements I think are really important. And it connecting that back to how you deal with legacy code, I I try to keep it as simple as possible because in the book, because that's aimed at like non-technical people, but I still talk about testing because I think it's really important that you define what types of tests you need and what types of situations. There's the whole chapter about that simply because I can't get around that. Um, but in that case, I bring it down to two types of tests, right? We have the high level tests that are very very low resolution, like we go through the flow and we know that everything fits together. And we have the lower level, high resolution, unit level tests but in reality, testing is fractal. If you go into it, you'll find that there's a new type of test in every situation that you find.
Mm.
And what I try to make sure is that the teams I work with, that they actually realize that they're dealing with a new situation, and they're dealing with a new type of test, and that they actually agree amongst each other that that's how they're going to be dealing with it, which is a lot easier if you're mobbing, which is a lot easier if you're
Yeah.
as a team actually talking together. But even if that's not the case, and especially I sometimes go into organizations that are I'm the main coach, and then there's like 30 teams or 60 teams, and well, it you can't like just go in and have that happen organically. So you need to have some structure so that even across those teams you start getting to standards and getting to at least a base level of quality and
Mm.
understanding. So
Nice.
the fun thing is, and I don't know if you ever go into a new organization, just ask them what type of tests they write, and then look at what the tests are, and then see how many different names you can find if you go from company to company. How many different names you can find for the same tests, or how many similar names you can find for different tests. It's wonderful. You can if you sit down and you think about your code
Mm.
base, you can probably think of like But anyone can think about, we've got, three levels of tests. We've got our integration test, we've got a unit test, and we've got some end-to-end or whatever we want to call those tests.
Sure.
But then if you zoom in, the unit test will be at a couple of different levels. Maybe you've got some sort of B2D, with more functional tests. You probably have actual integration tests that test integration with the database, for instance, and then you've got like more of a component level test. You've got your contract test. You've got your protocol test, which is a different thing, and so you can just make that completely explode. And you have to do that carefully because if you start doing the whole list in one go, people will think you're crazy,
Yeah.
which might be the case for you towards me right now. But yeah, but I really I enjoy the process of getting that alignment on
Mm.
how do we work, and I think it's really important if we want to make a dent in any large code base that we agree on
Nice.
how we do that.
Cool, cool, cool. Yeah, maybe one more follow-up question on this one topic. And maybe Chris, you can throw any ones you have on this one before pivoting. But the last one for me on this one was I can since Chris and I mob, I can imagine what half of your day is like, working, doing your kind of consulting or coaching on legacy. But can you share, so the half of the day where you mob with the team, for example, mob repair.
Yeah.
But what's your other half of the day like with leadership? Can you tell us more about that? Yeah.
Well, uh, one of the things is there's a lot of talking about value. Um, so especially when I work with the product side of things, and there's a lot of talk about how we break down work. Um, Interestingly enough, and then there's a lot of talk about, okay, so the goal setting. A lot of companies nowadays use OKR systems, for instance, and um, in most of these cases, that it devolves into just a planning mechanism instead of a goal setting mechanism. So let's talk about what strategy is, how you use goals to allow people to make decisions instead of nailing them down to quarterly plans of delivered functionality. Um, there's also things like I said, how do we across a larger organization make sure that we establish these standards? What kind of support is necessary for that? What kind of tooling do developers need to be able to deploy frequently? So I always say, and I'm very honest in this, I have no focus whatsoever. It's a miracle I managed to write a book on about one topic. But I very much like this sort of variation in my work. So I go all over the place. Um, I love going into, like I said, DevX tooling. How do we deploy? How do we make sure we actually have infrastructure as code, and how does that actually work for development teams to make their life easier? But um, like I said, I go all over the place. Yeah, and a lot of it is also standardization. If I and that's a topic that's also well, it was also on my list. But if I want to agree with the development teams that they fix bugs, and that is a subversive and radical idea, I know. But if that's what I'm doing, I need to agree with leadership what that means. I need to agree what the rules are. I need to sometimes agree what regulatory aspects there is, because sometimes for me fixing bugs means throwing them away. And it's so there's a lot of work that goes throughout the organization to make sure that everyone can work in the way that I think they should.
So, you were saying a little bit about maybe the prescriptive versus not prescriptive. So when you're talking to leadership about goals and OKRs, how does what manifests out of that? I was just curious. Are you does it end up with goals around unit tests being produced or around something, yeah, a little different than that? How does that turn out?
Uh, that depends. When I talk about those sort of goals, I was mostly talking about goals for the business.
Yeah.
So, as in, um, we have this particular area where we want to, where we see where we can improve our revenue in some way or reduce our cost or whatever. And we then the rest of the organization in consecutive steps needs to be able to find that direction within that. But
So,
yeah, there are a lot of there's a lot of friction between how do we encourage an organization to improve and how do we not let everyone invent the wheel, right?
mhm,
Um, I am at one point, and this has been a while ago. I used to be very much. I don't like goals for like test coverage numbers or anything
yeah.
because they don't mean anything. But then I ran into a team that absolutely wanted um, cutoffs in their delivery pipeline set at 100%. And I
Hmm.
was like, that seems a bit, first of all, that seems a bit high. Um, but also, it's easy to game. But they were actually using this to make sure that every time they decided that they did not need a test for a specific piece of code or a specific type of code, they would have the discussion and put the ignore in there, and so they wanted the system to actually break when they skipped that step,
Yeah.
and then it was used as a trigger for conversation, which I was I couldn't not be fine with. Um, but I don't know. I don't like setting those type of goals, but I
Yeah.
do like setting goals on we need to have defined how we test.
Hmm.
And we all need to agree on that, and we all need to execute on that. And that very rarely can you actually check that automatically or but having those again having those standards, having clear examples, having the patterns in
Yeah.
place both for testing and code. So I do talk with leadership about that, and I actually make sure that if we set goals, we set goals on that sort of thing.
And so is it like company-wide working agreements around testing versus the the higher level business being okay with the investment in certain areas?
Yeah,
Two
I
different
have a lot
topics.
of I have a lot of discussion about I have had a lot of discussion with people about whether it makes sense to have technical OKRs or whatever goals or whatever.
Yeah.
I tend to see these things as guardrails, not necessarily goals, right?
Hmm.
So I prefer to make sure that we've got the guardrails in place, the agreements in place on how we work, and that we leave the goals for the business side of things, because that also removes the continuous clash that you can have. And I'm fine with having the conversation with, with management, with product and engineering to establish the guardrails. But once they're there, I think we should leave that alone and continue. I'm not always successful in convincing people that that is a good idea.
Yeah.
Um,
Certainly a
once,
challenge.
but yeah, once management has this concept of, oh, we can set goals and things will magically happen, it becomes very attractive. So
Yeah.
very often there are technical goals set, and then I try to make sure that the way that they're set actually leads into these guardrails, and but that's
Yeah.
And
Yes.
no,
Oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead, Chris. Yeah.
I was going to jump to the next topic. So go ahead.
Well, I guess one more quick one on this one, and then we'll jump on. We keep saying we're going to switch to the next topic, but maybe we'll just end the episode talking about this topic all the time. It's so
Yeah.
good. But yeah, I guess quote unquote last one for this one is I've seen uh collective agreement before on technical side and business side that hey, these measurements are just triggers for conversations and guardrails, and everyone nods their head and says yes. And then you find yourself a month later, management using them as weapons to, wield to force behaviors, and then people are, doing the Cobra Law thing, making the numbers good, regardless if the behaviors and outcomes are actually good.
Yeah.
Um, is that just like a constant coaching effort for you to keep it
Yeah.
in a happy state, or what techniques do you have for this problem? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of them is I very much try, like I said earlier, I very much prefer to have patterns in place instead of like looking at like
Uh-huh.
cover numbers or anything like that.
Yeah. Mm.
Same for instance for planning. Like
Mhm.
I was just telling you, I did a workshop on dynamic discovery and planning. It's really not that exciting. One of the main points that I try to make is that it really helps if we plan in terms of stuff getting done instead of a number of things getting done, right? Because that if we say, in March we delivered feature, we will deliver we will work on and deliver feature one and two, and then. Well, of course, now I use numbers anyway. We'll in March we'll deliver the what's the default example nowadays? Well, let's stick to a shopping basket. We'll deliver, discount codes and we'll
Mhm.
deliver dynamic um, postage calculations, something like that. Um, shipping cost calculations. Um, if we if we talk about it in those terms, then instead of we deliver two features a month, then it becomes a completely different conversation, and you can then still talk about what the scope of these things is, and you can still, when you dive in deeper, actually work on how to make sure you manage on scope. But if you can actually stay closer to the work and stay away from statistics, then all the conversations become, I think, much more useful. So that I try and steer it in that direction, but doesn't always work. And I do sometimes enjoy using statistics to hit people over the head with, especially if if we're talking about all the delays that we have in our system, so that we
Ah, yeah.
can talk about process instead of badgering people that they should be working harder.
Mm.
Yeah, you can use it for good, but it's a tricky thing.
All right.
Gotcha.
Well, that I think can segue nicely into real teaming, and it's just more fun and fast and lively. But there's so few who actually do it. What what are your comments there?
Yeah, I'm sure that's that's a familiar topic for you. But it if I look back, so like I kind of started doing XP like 25 years ago, roughly, and parts of it earlier, and I got very much into the whole into the whole agile thing when everyone was doing transformations and all of that. I think the one thing that Agile added that wasn't necessarily there before, if we talk about lean or other sources of where that comes from, is the team. So I am consistently surprised by the way that people say they're doing something like Scrum or whatever. And everyone works in complete isolation. It's they very very rarely talk. And at the stand up they just everyone says I'm here, I'm doing something. If you're lucky, they point to the thing on, usually on Jira, but on the board with what they're actually working on. But you won't get much in terms of detail. I ran into a team, multiple teams in the last couple of years that just never did like any whiteboarding, even, right? I'm not even talking about pair programming or mobbing or anything like that, but just never actually had the conversation about, you know, what are we building and how are we going to build it? Um, and like I said, I think that's the magic part of what Agile adds to the mix. And I'm so I always try to move things in that direction in whatever way we can.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'm already happy when people have a 10-minute conversation, when they're starting a new piece of work on roughly where they're going. And other times I've got a team I'm working with right now who's pretty much doing almost full-time mobbing. They split off in pairs every now and again, and that's fine. Um, but I somewhere in that line of possibilities, I try to move things towards working together more, and it surprises me because every team that I do that with, um, starts enjoying their work more. Uh, they also start to become faster and deliver better quality, and but they just also just have a lot more fun and are a lot more relaxed in their work. So yeah, for me, this has been a recurring topic since I don't know, pretty much since I started. I think it's yeah. And why? Do you know? You guys talk about this a lot more than I.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess, yeah, and that kind of raises the question. I guess I'm kind of curious in your perspective. Here is thing X. Everyone will have more fun. It'll be more lively, higher quality, and better delivery from a lean perspective. Why aren't people saying, take all my money or let's do this now? Why is it that so few actually do it? Yeah, what are your thoughts there?
I wish I knew. No, sorry. Well, in the last year, I've had conversations with management and product people who were just getting very, very confused. Um, you've got everyone, and these are situations like, a team that was not delivering at all,
Hmm.
as in no new features were getting out, maybe one or two a year, and they started delivering a new feature or a clear step every week, which was a big step. Um, and the reaction was, but yeah, you've got everyone working on this on one thing. Why don't I just take out a few people and they can work on this other thing? And I'm like, there's a reason we did this change, and you can see what the effect is, right? So it's actually working, but accepting that this may actually play a role in getting the effects that you want is seems to be really, really difficult. And to be honest, I've just got just as much um, issues or conversations or discussions with developers who also they get, but that's mostly at the beginning. They get nervous because it feels like everyone's watching them work, which is true. Um, but For the developers, at least, it's easy to just start with some fun stuff. You do start doing some katas, or you've got a big, a complicated issue, and you go in there with the whole team together, and then it kind of you break down the resistance from the inside by just having fun fixing problems, which most developers actually like doing, right? So, and then slowly they start to accept, this is actually a good thing. But the people who are not in the team, and they get the issue, but they just never experience any of that. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, that's so fascinating to me that and I guess, kind of hearing that story of like you guys worked as a mob and everything's great. Let's turn this up even further by splitting up the people who got together and made it great. It's like, oh, they're all delivering now, so let's make them deliver separately. I have seen that reaction before where it was kind of like uh now that this mob thing's working, let's propagate it by splitting them up, right? I have seen that reaction before, and I'm trying to. It's almost maybe it's this assumption that once the mob has learned to do this, everyone in the mob, as a solo, now can do this alone, or something like they've like acquired the magical power, and now they can do it alone.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe it's
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
trying to guess, but yeah, go ahead.
No, no, no. I like. I'm just guessing with you. I, I have done. I mean, I've done like trainings in mob form for whole teams, and I just had the product owner, for instance, be part of the mob and actually do coding a little slower than most, but still do coding as part of that. Um, and that you get really interesting like reactions from that. Um, Oddly enough, both from the development side as from the product side, product owners were like, "Oh my God, there is a huge number of decisions that you take every minute or so, right?" It's they started to get more of a feeling of what was actually involved in
Mm,
actually writing the code, which I thought was a very good. Um, and the developers really appreciated never having to having to go out of the team to ask questions. Um, but yeah, in how do you say that? In the wild, in companies, I've not been able to get that to that point. So the mobs definitely are well, there's testers in there, there's UX peoples in there sometimes, and that there's front end and back end developers and whatever you want to call that. But it very rarely is a product person actually part of the mob. Um, yeah.
mm.
All right. Well, in the interest of time, I just want to touch on the last topic. So, bug collectors, like also known as the zero bug policy. What do you have there?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Sorry. That's yeah. You asked for three topics, and that
Yeah,
one is
yeah.
also like what do you call that? Bee in my bonnet. It's it, I have a. I'm sorry. I,
Take
I
your time. Yeah.
again. I'm sorry to mention it always, but I've got like a storyline in there of a product owner who's
Yeah.
dealing with a legacy system, and and then there's like 3,000 bugs on the backlog, and then and then they need to deal with it, and they have the triage meetings, and everything is just excruciating. Um, and one of my proofreaders actually came back to me and said, "Okay, this just feels like you've just been looking, spying on me or something."
Yeah.
Yeah, our bug list is more towards the 4,000, and we just planned to have a multiple day triage session where we're going to go through all of them and decide which ones we're going to fix. And the amount of time and effort and energy and I mean, we all want people to get together and talk and fix problems together. I don't want people to sit in a room, talk about which bugs they're not going to fix.
Yeah.
It is such an incredible waste. So yeah, anyway, so like I said, it's something I can get a little worked up about. Um, and the solution is very, very easy. It's just, if you get a if someone reports a bug, whether that's in the company or it's outside of it, you fix it. Um, well, that was it actually. But the more complex version is you fix it right now, or you plan to fix it next week or next sprint or whatever you want to do. Or you throw it away because you don't think it's important. But you don't keep like don't
Yeah.
take a little pin and pin it on the wall and keep coming back to it and admire it share it with everyone around you so that they can also waste time talking about it and not fixing it. For me, it's just horrible. And yeah, so one of the things I tend to do, we were talking about what kind of like things do I put in place with leadership. One of the things I put in place is agreements on if we get a bug, it goes straight to a development team. They decide whether to fix it now or next or not. And that's it. There's no product people involved unless, it's being pushed around and then they can maybe either, say, no, we don't have to do that or fix it earlier. And that's it. And every time I've done that, we've gone from these like thousands of defects where people would spend hours every week with sometimes 10 people in the room discussing them. We would just go back to the normal lifetime of a bug, right? And the normal lifetime of a bug, if you've got, yeah, if you do like 2 week sprints, which I think is very long, but whatever. But if you do like 2 week sprints, that means that it's fixed within 30 days, always. That's it. And sometimes it takes a while to get there. I've had companies where they do the town hall meeting every month, and this person has been with the company for 2 years now. Hey, Jim, great. And I started doing the same thing for the bugs. So I said, oh, this bug has been with the company for 3 years now. And
I love it. I love it.
yeah, so I tried to kind of shame everyone into like caring, but that doesn't work in the end. In the end, what you need is good rules in place to allow people to just pick up the bugs and fix them. And there's always a few left over. There's a few that but every time I've done this, we went from this situation where there's something you can say we won't fix, and almost every time I've done this, development teams just stopped doing that. They just stopped not fixing bugs. And I think that that's a really important thing to do.
Yeah.
So I did try to talk about that every now and again. Yeah.
Nice, nice. So I'd love to dig in even more, but we are at time. So, is there anything you'd like to share or plug before we close?
Well, people tell me I need to sell the book, so that's why I've been. I put a copy over here somewhere.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
No, but I would I'm horrible at selling. I thought writing it was plenty of work. So, but if people want to have a look, it's at escapinglegacy.com, and you can just get it physical, virtual, whatever. And if not, they can complain if they do read it, or if they don't, they can complain to me about all of the topics I talk about by just getting in touch. Um, I'm very easy to find on escapinglegacy.com or on lagerwij.com. Um, so that's all I can do bug wise.
Nice, nice. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. It was a great pleasure talking through all of this with you, and I'm sure a lot of our audience can resonate with a lot of the topics. And so, yeah, we really appreciate you sharing your experiences and insights and stories. And to our audience, if what he's talked about has resonated with you, and you find yourself like swimming in thousands of bugs, and you're just there's fire all around you, but you're just drinking your coffee, saying this is fine. Maybe some of his techniques can be a way out for you. And so, yeah, please like, subscribe. We love to see your comments on this, your opinions on this topic. Please share this with others who might be in a similar boat, floating in these bugs. And until next time, mob on everyone and have a good one. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for having me, guys.